Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going deep on the life of a pretty fascinating figure, Saint Jane Frances de Chantal.
Definitely an interesting one.
And to guide us through all of this, we're using Emily Bowles' book, The Life of Saint Jane Frances de Chantal. I'm excited to see what we find.
Oh yeah, me too. I think a lot of people, when they hear saint, they think of someone who's just kind of
Perfect.
Yeah. But Jane Frances de Chantal, well, she was a real person.
Yeah, a human being.
Yeah, she had ups and downs, and I think that's what makes her story so inspiring.
It's like we can relate to her a bit more, right?
Totally. Her story shows how faith can get you through tough times. It's kind of a testament to how God works in our lives, even when things are hard.
I like that. So let's go back to the beginning. She was born in Dijon, France in January 1572, and she lost her mom when she was really little.
Wow. Yeah, that must have been incredibly difficult for her.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. But even so, from what we know about her childhood, she was a strong person.
Yeah.
There's this interesting mix you see in her. Like, she could be stern, but she also had so much compassion.
Yeah.
Even as a kid, she loved God and wanted to help the poor.
It makes you wonder if losing her mom so young actually made her more empathetic.
Could be. Her dad was a big influence, too. He was president of the Burgundian Parliament and made sure she got a good education and had strong morals.
It sounds like he saw something special in her even back then.
Definitely. And those qualities in her just kept growing. But then at 18, things changed a lot. She got married to the Baron de Chantal in an arranged marriage and moved to the Bourbally estate.
I bet that was a huge adjustment.
Oh, yeah. A big transition for sure. But Jane Frances really threw herself into being the Baroness. She managed everything so well, and she was really kind and caring. But it was her husband, the Baron, who really sparked her spiritual journey.
And that's tied to the awful tragedy that happened later on, right?
Right.
The Baron died in a hunting accident when Jane Frances was only 28.
Devastating.
I can't even imagine.
It was a turning point for her, for sure. The story of the accident itself is just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
He got shot accidentally, and Jane Frances did everything she could to save him. She even begged the doctors to try anything, even though his injury was so bad.
Yeah, and the book says that even as he was dying, the Baron talked about their shared faith.
Yeah.
And he wanted her to keep growing spiritually.
It's clear they had a very deep connection. His death really changed everything for her. She gave up all her fancy clothes and jewelry.
Wow.
It was like she was showing everyone that she was dedicated to a life with God.
And then she even took a vow of chastity, right?
She did. That was a big decision, especially back then for someone in her position. But she felt called to give her whole life to God. She knew she needed guidance, but she also knew it wouldn't be easy.
And that's where Frances de Sales comes in, right?
Sure.
The Bishop of Geneva.
Exactly. He became her spiritual director.
It seems like they had a really special relationship.
They did. Frances de Sales wasn't just any spiritual director. He was a famous theologian, super smart and really understanding. He saw how strong Jane Frances was and how much she wanted to be closer to God.
And he didn't try to fit her into some box, right?
No, not at all. He knew everyone's journey to holiness is different. He helped her find her own way within the church.
So what kind of advice did he give her?
Well, he definitely encouraged her to have a regular prayer routine. He said it was important to make time for quiet and connecting with God.
Okay.
But he also stressed balance. She was still a mother and had kids to raise. He didn't want her to be so strict that she couldn't care for her family.
Right.
And of course, he taught her about the church's teachings, like developing a personal love for Jesus Christ and being devoted to the church.
It sounds like he had a really loving approach.
He did. He wanted her to experience the joy and freedom that come with giving your heart to God.
I think their relationship was much more than just spiritual director and directee.
Oh, yeah, totally. There was a ton of respect and trust there. You can see it in how Francis entrusted his own younger sister to Jane Frances's care.
Wow.
They wrote letters back and forth, and you can just feel the spiritual bond between them. It was a friendship built on faith and wanting to serve God.
It's amazing to think that these letters from so long ago can still speak to us today.
It's true. It shows how timeless these ideas of faith and guidance really are.
And it was through this relationship with Frances de Sales that Jane Frances started to figure out what she was really meant to do.
And that led to some pretty big decisions, like founding a whole new religious order.
Yeah, the Visitation Order. That's got to take a lot of courage and faith.
It does. But maybe we should stop here for now. We can talk about the order and all the challenges she faced in the next part. Okay, so we were talking about Jane Frances and her calling, and I think it's worth pointing out that starting a new religious order, especially for women back then, that was a pretty bold move.
Yeah, definitely.
It challenged how things were usually done, and it gave women who wanted a deeper spiritual life more choices.
So what was so special about the Visitation Order? What made it different from all the other communities of women religious at the time?
Well, one big thing was that it was all about humility and being accessible.
Got
Francis de Sales, he believed that every woman should be able to grow closer to God and serve him, no matter what her background was or her social status.
Right.
So the Visitation Order was open to women who maybe wouldn't have been allowed in other, more closed-off communities.
It sounds like they were breaking down walls, making the church a more welcoming place for women.
Exactly. And they didn't stop there. Even their daily life was different. Unlike some orders that had to stay completely shut off from the world, the Visitation Sisters were encouraged to go out and do things, especially helping the sick and poor.
So they were combining prayer with actually going out and doing good.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And this really appealed to Jane Frances, who was now known as Mother de Chantal.
Okay.
She always loved helping others, and this new order let her be deeply spiritual and also make a real difference in the world.
Speaking of making a difference, the book talks about their early days at the Gallery House in Anna Racy. They lived a really simple life, didn't they?
Oh yeah, super simple. They embraced poverty. They used earthenware mugs, wooden spoons, nothing fancy.
Wow, that's a big change from her life as a baroness.
It is. It must have taken a lot of humility to let go of all that.
Definitely.
But it also created this strong sense of community and equality.
Yeah.
Everyone did their part and no one was too good for any task.
It shows you that true holiness can be found in the everyday things.
Absolutely. And Francis de Sales, he was a great guide for them. He knew how to use everyday moments to teach them, like that story about the thunderstorm that scared the novices.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
He calmed them down with humor, telling them that lightning only struck great saints and great sinners, and then joked that they were neither.
He sounds like a fun guy.
He was, but he was also wise. After the storm passed, he gave each novice a specific virtue to work on. He really knew how to guide each person individually.
He sounds like a great teacher.
He was. And Mother de Chantal, she totally believed in his vision. She even encouraged the sisters to let go of things they were attached to, even religious items.
Yeah, the book talked about how some nuns wanted to keep their own crucifixes and pictures of saints.
Right, and Francis de Sales suggested they switch those things around every so often.
Interesting.
The idea was to help them focus on God himself, not on the objects.
That must have been hard for some of them.
It was. It was a new idea at the time, especially for women who often found comfort in those personal religious items. But it shows a key part of Salesian spirituality, letting go of anything that gets in the way of your relationship with God, even things that seem holy.
So it's about getting rid of distractions to find true faith.
Exactly. And Mother de Chantal, she lived that way. She set an example, always reminding the sisters that real humility means being simple and serving others. There's that story about when she visited one of the convents and they had decorated her room all fancy.
I remember that. She immediately had them get rid of all the decorations.
She did. She reminded them that they were brides of Christ, not royalty.
She was serious about living simply.
She was. It shows how much she understood the gospel and how much she wanted to live it out. She didn't care about comfort or status. She just wanted to create a community that reflected the humility and simplicity of Jesus.
And even as the order grew, she never lost sight of that.
It's impressive, right?
Yeah.
But of course, growth brought challenges. Money was tight, some people didn't understand their vision, and there were even disagreements within the community.
And Mother de Chantal experienced even more personal loss. Her daughter Marie Aimée died very young.
That's right, but she became a novice on her deathbed. It's really powerful.
Yeah, it really shows how strong their faith was.
It does. And it reminds us that even when things are good, life can still be hard. Mother de Chantal knew that.
The book also mentions that she struggled with doubt and temptation later in life. How did she deal with that?
Yeah, she said her mind felt like it was swarming with frightful reptiles.
Wow.
She had blasphemous thoughts and was really hard on herself. It just goes to show that even the most faithful people can have spiritual struggles.
So what helped her?
Obedience and trusting in God. She relied on her spiritual director and never gave up on the rules of the Visitation Order. Her strength really shines through in those tough times.
You know, maybe going through those struggles made her an even better guide for others.
I think so. She knew what it was like to face those challenges, so she could really empathize with others who were going through similar things.
It's like God used her weaknesses to make her stronger and to help others.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And it brings us to another important part of Mother de Chantal's life. She wasn't just a spiritual mother to the sisters in her order. She was also a mother to her own children.
Right. It's easy to forget that these saints were real people with families and normal problems.
You're right. She had to balance her spiritual calling with raising a family. And it wasn't always easy.
I bet. Especially with her daughter, Francoise, who went through a rebellious phase.
Yeah, that must have been tough. But Mother de Chantal stuck with it.
Good for her.
She used the same love, patience, and wisdom that she used in her spiritual direction. And eventually Francoise got married and became devout again.
That's great. It shows how strong Mother de Chantal's faith was and how well she understood people. She knew that faith wasn't about forcing people into a box, but about meeting them where they were and walking with them on their journey.
Her story is a great example of how holiness can exist within a family, even with all the messiness and challenges that come with it. And as we'll see in the last part, her legacy went way beyond her family and the visitation convents.
Yeah, it's really something else how she managed everything. A spiritual leader, a mother to her own kids, and to all these sisters. It's kind of inspiring.
Totally. And her story doesn't end there. Her influence went way beyond her own life. By the time she died, there were over 80 visitation convents. Her vision and Frances de Sales's vision, they really took off and touched so many people.
80 convents. That's amazing. Think about how many people's lives she must have touched.
It's incredible. And it wasn't just about the order growing. She had a huge impact on individuals, too. She wrote letters to lots of people who were looking for spiritual guidance, giving advice and encouraging people who were struggling with their faith.
The book mentions Madame de Montmorency. She was a noble woman who went through some really tough times. And she found comfort and inspiration in Mother de Chantal's advice.
Yeah, Mother de Chantal had this amazing way of meeting people where they were. Her guidance could be tough, but it was always full of love. She wasn't afraid to tell the truth, but she did it in a kind and understanding way.
I think that's something we can all learn from, whether we're raising kids or mentoring someone or just being there for a friend.
It's all about recognizing that everyone deserves love and respect, and that's something you see in everything Mother de Chantal did.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, what do you think are the most important things we can learn from Mother de Chantal's life?
Well, her resilience, for sure. She went through so much, losing her husband, losing children, money problems, people criticizing her work. But she never gave up. Her faith was what kept her going. It was her source of strength.
Yeah, and she didn't just sit around and pray. She took action. She helped people. She made a difference in the world.
Exactly. That's another big takeaway. Mother de Chantal shows us what it means to really live out the gospel. Her faith wasn't just something she thought about. It was something she did. It showed in how she treated people and how she served others.
Like they say, faith without works is dead.
Right. And she did it all with such humility. She didn't want attention or praise. She always pointed people to Christ. She knew that true happiness comes from serving God and loving each other.
That's a good reminder for all of us. Being holy isn't about being perfect. It's about trying to live each day with love, humility, and wanting to serve God however he calls us.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that Mother de Chantal wasn't superhuman. She had doubts. She was tempted. She felt spiritually dry sometimes, just like we all do.
But she didn't let those things defeat her. She leaned on her spiritual director, her community, and most importantly, her faith in God.
Her story gives us hope, no matter what we're going through, even when things seem really dark. God's grace is enough. We can find strength in prayer, in the sacraments, and in our faith communities.
I think that's why her story is so powerful and still relevant today. It shows us that anyone can be holy. It's not just for people who live extraordinary lives. We can all strive for holiness in our normal everyday lives.
I love that. It's about saying yes to holiness right here, right now, in our relationships, our jobs, and everything we do.
So for everyone listening, what part of Mother de Chantal's life speaks to you the most? Is it how she handled tough times, her commitment to serving others, how she balanced being a spiritual leader and a mom? I hope you'll think about her story, maybe read some of her writings, and let her inspire you on your own faith journey.
It's been great talking about her with you today. I hope everyone listening will remember her message of hope and never giving up.
Me too. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the life of Saint Jane, Frances de Chantal. May her example encourage all of us to become saints in our own way.